Welcome again to our Enable webinar on the economics of Cloud-first data protection. My name is Mark, and I am joined by Gavin Cross, who is from an Enable Sales Engineer Lead, and is presenting all the way from Sydney. Just the agenda for today's webinar is that Gavin will be talking across the economics behind Cloud-first data protection for the first 30 minutes, and after that, probably he'll spend like 15 minutes again for the Cove Data Console, just showing you the backup and recovery. And then after all that, we'll go towards the end, and we'll do a 10 minutes or 15 minutes Q&A session, depending on how much time is left. Right. So if you have questions on the right pane here, you can actually write all those questions there, and then we'll address them towards the end of the session. And if we do run out of time, we'll definitely get back to you via call or an email. We can arrange another meeting together with Gavin if there's questions that we won't be able to answer during this webinar, right? So, and also before I forget, there's a $40 pizza voucher for everyone who would listen until towards the end of the webinar. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, so just a bit of an intro about myself and Soft Solutions. So again, my name is Mark, and I am the product manager for Enable at Soft Solutions. I've been in the role for about 6 months now, and I have been helping to drive growth and brand awareness for Enable across MSPs, and also just a bit of a history that Soft Solutions have introduced Enable into the New Zealand market for over 10 years now. So we're trying to help drive and assist the growing number of MSPs coming from New Zealand like yourselves. So yeah, I'm just gonna hand it out to Gavin now. So probably do a quick intro about himself and then proceed directly towards his slides. And yeah, take it away, Gavin.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'm Gavin Cross. I've been with Enable for 3 years, predominantly dealing with the backup or Cove Data Protection solution. Prior to that, I've worked with various MSPs and actual IT departments throughout my career across finance, mining, automotive, of course, MSPs as well. And today I find myself here. So without further ado, let's get into the economics behind Cloud-first data protection. And well, how do you provide top tier data protection and have the lowest cost of service delivery? Today we're going to be talking about the economics of Cloud-first data protection, and to do that, we're going to share the stories of 3 icebergs. But before those stories get told,
there real quick, you might just do the presenter mode.
Oh, we're not presenting?
Notes as well.
I'm sorry?
You might need to do the go as a present.
Present as presenting?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're seeing your notes and the next slide.
I see my notes. Oh, okay. I thought it was sharing the other screen. My apologies.
Yeah.
Let me fix that up.
Nope, still the same.
The one.
There you go.
There we go. That's probably better. How's that? Is that good?
Yep, all good.
We're all good. Fantastic. So we'll be going to spend a bit of time on macroeconomics in the industry, and then we're going to be spending a little bit more time on the microeconomics and what that actually means for service providers. So, DPaaS, it's a rising tide, data protection as a service, and it's growing at almost 17% compound annual growth. And within that, backup as a service there on the left, that subsegment is growing at 13%. Disaster recovery as a service, as a subsegment, is growing at 23%. And that's primarily driven by cyber risks. Within the MSP stack, DPaaS continues to be a major pillar of managed services alongside SaaS and cybersecurity. And within DPaaS vendors, the names Veeam and Datto tend to come up most often, and so we're going to give them particular attention today. And circling back to the top of the slide, what do we even mean by BaaS and DRaaS? Well, let me introduce you to Michael and Robert, and these are the two personas we serve in the SMB space typically. Michael, on one hand, he's the happy-go-lucky guy. As you can see, he's reluctant to spend money on new services, and he's okay with a reasonable recovery time, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know. But you do know that he's going to be calling you every time that there's an hour of downtime. Robert, on the other hand, he's seen some stuff. He's more grizzled. He's perhaps had a friend who's struggled in the past with maybe a ransomware attack or something like that, and he knows that he can't afford significant downtimes. So as a result, he knows that he's going to demand a certain protection with shorter RTOs, and he knows that this kind of protection will come at a cost. And head to head, you can see you have them there. Michael there with his cheap and cheerful outcome there, backup as a service. That's just the backup itself only, with just a few basic rudimentary settings of one backup a day, so that he's not going to lose more than 1 day of backup, with a return to operation in less than 48 hours typically. Retention sitting at about 30 days, and then the rest of the usual, so the monitoring and the support that goes on top. Robert there, on the other hand, he's been offered the more premium solution, so going all so far as to offer the recovery as a solution. We have an RPO of hourly, so he's never going to lose more than 1 hour worth of data, an RTO of 4 hours, and it will keep a retention of 90 days, much more than what Michael was getting. We will also do some recovery testing, let's say, so that we trust the backup, but we still verify it to make sure that it is still working. And of course, the bells and whistles for the monitoring that go on top there. So when it comes to cloud economics, I'd ask, are you a believer? And I think a more interesting way to ask that question is, who's actually set up an Exchange server in the past 12 months? And if you haven't, I doubt you have, I'm going to say that you are a believer, because it may seem obvious, but if I go back, let's say 8 years ago, the answer is going to be a lot more different. And we know what the story was. Beforehand, you had to acquire the licensing for your Exchange server. You had to acquire the hardware for it. You had to obviously get the know-how to build it all up, patch and secure it. The networks needed to be built for that. The linkages, etc., and the constant upgrades and maintenance that goes with that. Come COVID, a lot of people just moved away from that kind of model, and it's now in the cloud. It's, you know where it is. It's in Microsoft 365. So you're getting a lot more value there. You've got a lot more security, a lot more upgrades being carried out. Maintenance it's not really your problem anymore. Maybe just a little bit of rudimentary administration, but a lot of that headache has been removed. So it's a highly available solution that's centralized in the cloud. And then the predictable pricing is pretty nice on that OpEx model. There's 3 items that I'm going to actually put on the scorecard here, and the first is the security and risk posture. I'll talk about that more on the next slide, but our very own Stefan Voss and Dave McKinnon, they tend to go a bit deeper on this one. But what you have to appreciate is that there's going to be a cost, albeit perhaps a soft cost with that risk. And if you want to put a value on it, think about cyber insurance, or really any kind of insurance. If you have a higher risk exposure, what will the cost of your policy do? It's going to go up, isn't it? I can tell you that if you add a 16-year-old to a car insurance policy, it's going to go up. And the second piece is the hard costs. So setting up infrastructure at, for example, 90 locations versus having one primary backup storage. So which one do you reckon is going to have the economic advantage? And after you have got that all set up, it's all the work involved. And thirdly, the tickets, let's say with those 90 locations, for logging into all those 90 locations, for the patching, for the software upgrades, for the trade-offs when you run out of space, and for the tiering policy, for this remote storage. It's all starting to sound like it makes sense. And let's really break this down. So with our security scorecard, well, the lines between data protection and security are blurring. It's now a boardroom conversation. It's a governance topic, and it's related to cyber insurance, yes. It's still about RTO and RPO and retention as the main outcomes, but now falling under this umbrella of security. And within security, ransomware recovery is the #1 concern, and not really new anymore, hey, but you know, the reality of the backup applications being a high priority to attackers. They know that if they take out your backups, there's a good chance that they're going to get paid. We see legacy solutions using fancy words like immutability or air gapping or worm. And that's because they've got a local first architecture. And that means the backup application is essentially part of the attack surface. So they need to bolt on more copies and more features to address that risk. And the last thing to mention there is relative to 5 years ago, it was really about instant recovery. So how quickly can I actually get that system returned to service? And well, ransom recovery isn't quite the same problem to solve because you need to be a lot more prescriptive. In the case of ransomware recovery, you don't want to necessarily instant recover back into production because that just means the bad actors are just going to make a return visit at their own leisure. So the instant response is a different game. The third thing is the cloud is now a mainstream requirement, and applications run in many places, so therefore does the data. So it's local, it's at the data center, and it's been like that for a while. But it's also at the hyperscalers, so it's living in Azure VM, and it's also at SaaS applications. So, and we all know that the biggest one there being Microsoft 365. And really, one of the things we've seen transform over the last 5 years is that data protection of that data in Microsoft 365 is now broadly accepted as an actual requirement. And so what hasn't actually changed? Well, your MSP. So you've got multi-tenancies, you've got multiple customers. It's not really much of a change there. There's always going to be image-based recovery. The cost of service delivery, it's always a concern for many people. And so if we're predicting the vector of the data protection puck correctly, what side of history do you want to end up on? Local first vendors like Veeam and Datto, they've done their best to assert that the local first architecture is the only answer. They've done their best to leverage the cloud with that architecture and assert that a local first architecture is the only answer. They've done their best there, quite significantly there. Essentially, they're a local first solution that bolts onto a secondary process to move that data off-site. Cloud-first is going to be the opposite, and data goes direct from production to the off-site storage. Fundamentally, that's going to be a different architecture. And the question today is whether that fundamental difference can deliver on 2 key promises. And the first key promise is there that promise of dramatically better economics, and secondly, the promise of better business class disaster recovery. And historically, many technicians haven't believed it. And to answer that question, let's explore a little more with Veeam and Datto on the next slide. So with Veeam, let's say hypothetically, you could license it for $10 a VM, but that's only going to be a partial solution. You're still going to need procurement and plus sizing for each customer, and over provisioning for each of them, and the patching for each, and the list goes on. I mean, you also got to duplicate that for every single customer that you want to service in this way. And so, looking at our first iceberg, you can see there's a lot of pieces to stitch together with Veeam. There's a lot to maintain, there's a lot of complexity, and therefore a lot of labor. And you can see that represented there in the iceberg. So we got our local storage, our remote storage, our backup servers, the procurement, managing the monitoring and maintenance, Was there any skilled resources required? The security gaps, complexity, patching, data set, it keeps going on. So most technicians are generalists, and it's not like life in the enterprise world where your job is just as the backup admin and you're setting up this backup at just a couple of data centers. You'd be setting up a unique backup environment for pretty much every single customer that you've got, plus the patching, the upgrading at every location, and the risks involved when plugging the wires together at every location. It can create security gaps, which is especially important, knowing that that is exactly what the attackers are targeting. But one thing is actually clear, is that the cost of Veeam is going to be a very small part of your total cost of ownership. And what might not be so obvious is that cloud-first architecture has a massive impact on the costs below the surface. So for example, going from 3 people on the backup down to 1, or more extreme case, 90 tickets a day going down to 9 tickets a day, or 40 hours maintaining a backup system, moving that down to just 4 hours. And there can be some pretty significant benefits there. The story of the Datto iceberg is a little bit different. So MSPs will talk about how it's turnkey and it's the easy button for your DR, and complexity has been removed and it includes everything I need. And it's true that I need to size for each customer and do the procurement work, and I've got peace of mind there, but it kind of stops there. That's all great. The costs below the surface are removed, but let's take a look at what's actually above the surface. Let's take a theoretical MSP of about 30 customers. We can see they've been broken down into small, medium, and large for a total of 30, as I said. We have an average of about 4, 6, and 8 devices for the small, medium, and larges, and just focusing on the smalls for the purposes of the presentation, we'll have an average size of 200 gigabytes there, with a total of 60 small devices for the small guys. Total of 160 across all of the customers that I've got. Now let's let's put in a Datto device, for example. We need to spec it out. We're going to put in the 2400 gigabyte size device, which is good enough for, let's say, 4 devices, and we'll give it a theoretical SKU of S4P4. Down below, we can see the ongoing monthly costs for that device, $455 for that small device, all in at $6,000, almost $7,000, just for the small customers. All in for all my customers for the month, we're sitting at $17,400. But Veeam, I know, will try to sell you on a 3-year solution. So if we calculate that all up, you're in for just over $600,000. And we don't have our appliance just yet. So the cost for our appliance going to be sitting at around about, around about $2,000 on the small over here. There it is, and then just short of $31,000 for the smalls if we calculate all our small guys. You can see the totals there at the end of the month, sitting at $19,000 and a grand total of $700,000 with our appliance already applied. So pretty significant costs there over 3 years, all of our small, medium, and large customers there. And then you have to ask yourself, hang on a second, with this recovery environment, am I actually paying more to facilitate this environment versus the production environment? And then what's my margin on this? Is it wafer thin? And have you ever tested that recovery from the vendor's cloud? How painful was that? What was involved? Are you actually willing to pay a premium for this kind of service if you're not actually going to use it? Those sorts of questions are pretty interesting, I reckon. And what about things like your Azure VMs? If it's not included, workstations not included, Microsoft 365 not included. What about those? Things worth thinking about. And Datto doesn't actually want to charge this egregious pricing, but the underlying cost structure of theirs, it makes it impossible to do otherwise. And I'll show you why. Let's slip in a cloud-first data protection like let's slip in cloud-first data protection like Cove, you can see we have a cost of $5,000 for the month for all our devices all in. And over 3 years, $180,000 there. And you can see in the red there, we're talking a difference of $500,000. Now, admittedly, that doesn't include any infrastructure for a recovery too. So, for example, let's throw in $120,000 worth of Dell hardware, and that can act as the standby environment. Now, $120,000 plus $180,000, you're sitting at $300,000, and you're still laughing because you're well ahead of that $700,000 figure from Datto. Now, if $120,000 is still too much, drop it down to some refurbished gear at $40,000. Doesn't have to be running at the same speed as the production environment, but it'll still function as a standby sandbox. And what do you think might be the smartest way for Robert or Michael? So if I'm achieving those same outcomes, do I need to actually charge the same price? Can I keep charging what I'm charging, or could I perhaps even give the customer a discount? Things to think about. You certainly have a lot more room to move. So it's not just a 10% savings I'm talking about. It's significant and it's disruptive. And this transformative difference is based on an architectural advantage, and it's a different kind of iceberg that I'd be talking about. It's now starting to look more like an ice cube. So copy one would be at one location, and that'd be managed for you. All the tedious work of procurement and managing that storage and the backup applications, the upgrades, the patching, the data center costs, it's all taken off your plate. And generalists or even interns, for example, they can deploy and monitor this. They can reduce your time and tickets by 90%. And if we're so smart, why isn't everybody actually doing this? Well, you might be asking yourself that, but why isn't everybody just copying us? And if it's such a smart idea, well, that's because it's actually hard to make a complex process look easy. And I'd like to say we just have some secret sauce. For example, we break your files into certain smaller blocks that are obviously smaller than the original size of the file, but the process is that it will compress that data, will deduplicate that data, will cabinetize that data into 8 megabyte cabinet files, and then we'll lastly encrypt that data, and it remains in that state when we transmit it to the data center. And we maintain a reliable register of those changes through journals. This is not a chain technology. This is a journal technology. It's a fundamentally different architecture. And what about disaster recovery? Well, with such a lightweight backup, our options for recovery, they tend to actually broaden. So for a long time, our backup vendors have actually conditioned us to think you actually need an image backup. Well, not quite true. You actually want image recovery, not image backup. And the truth is you don't need image level backups to recover an image. A VM is just a series of files that is organized in a very specific way. And if you back up all that data from within the OS, you can create virtual machines quickly and easily. And that's assuming you have all the right software, of course. No image-based backup vendor is going to actually highlight this fact. They want you to think, they want you to believe that you need image-based backup for pretty obvious reasons, but it's simply not true. So I'll repeat one of today's takeaways. You don't need image-level backups to recover as an image. And this has some pretty important implications. You might recognize some of the imagery on the screen right now. This is one of the competitors out there. We can see in our test environment, we actually ran some tests to just see how it would perform. We can see the first backup, they're sitting at just 21 gigabytes, and then every following backup sitting at around about sorry, did I say gigabytes? I meant, yeah, that's gigabytes. Yeah, 21 gigabytes. We have the subsequent backup sitting at 2 gigabytes. So each subsequent backup is sitting at about 10%. Why don't we compare that to Cove Data Protection? Sitting at the top there, we can see our test server of 500 gig in size. We've been very generous with their incremental change rate, and we've called it 6%, even though I just showed you on the last page it was 10%. So we're going to give them a fighting chance. Versus Cove, we're sitting at 0.1% there, you can see on the second line. If we take a look at the incremental payload, for that classic image level backup, you're sitting at about 30 gigabytes versus us, Cove, sitting at half a gigabyte to do the same workload. And then if you follow down the list there, let's say under a backup strategy of 60 days retention, initial backup will, let's say, be 350 gigabytes, and that's pretty even across the board there. But after that point, with the incrementals, it's a bloodbath. You can see with a classic image level backup, 1800 gigabytes is required versus the Cove Data Protection sitting at 30 gigabytes. All in, with the classic image level backup, 2150 gigabytes versus 380 gigabytes. Massive changes and massive convenience there. And that opens us up to all sorts of other options with our customers. For example, the bandwidth requirements become far less. If we need to do this backup in, say, an hour, we're going to need an internet speed. If we're talking about the classic image level backup, we have a payload of 30 gigabytes and we'll need to have an internet speed of, well, 70 megabits to do it. Versus Enable, or a Cove, should I say, we'd only need a 1 megabit link to do that half gigabyte payload. So you could start to offer backups that are occurring instead of every day, maybe every 4 hours or every hour, because you have the luxury to do that. And the change rate also means that like I said, the frequency of the backups can be increased. And this is just a testament from one of our other customers out in, I think, Europe, this guy. So he's now able to, modify and augment the way that he offers his backups to his customers. Change rate also impacts the storage requirements, as I evidenced there before. So you're no longer spending so much time or worrying about how much data you've got to provision for. I know with other solutions out there, you often have to provision 2 times, 3 times as amount of data that you've got in the production server. And then the standardization benefits, well, you can reduce your staff time spent switching among products. By using one pane of glass, you can back up your Windows devices, Linux devices, Mac devices, Microsoft 365 devices. You're improving that consistency there across your operations, and of course the training time is by definition much lower. Simplify your service offerings and billing, maybe offer 2 tiers, maybe 3 tiers, and of course human error is minimized because it's a pretty simple product to deal with. So when it comes to actually rolling out this solution, we have the ability to roll out hundreds of devices in the space of a couple of hours, really. Oftentimes I hear stories of guys rolling out 100 devices on Friday afternoon, coming back on Monday, finding all their devices that have already synced up and are already doing Delta backups. So last point there is that, you have free technical onboarding assistance, which is pretty nice. We have worldwide coverage. So if you call us, we'll always be there to pick up. We have a priority support line if you ever need assistance in regards to a recovery. We know that recoveries are the most important part of your backup solution. And if that's interesting to you, perhaps spend a little bit of time having a chat with us. We'll be quite happy to show you a bit more on the product itself. And if that's, if this is something interesting to you, if you think that this has the architectural advantages that you might want to see, perhaps give us a look. So again, with Veeam, we offer much less complexity, much smaller investment on time, and a much more reliable method of getting backup copies offsite. Against Datto, we provide a similar outcome for half the cost, essentially. Plus, we're much better suited for servers running in a hyperscaler or from work from home use cases. And also that Microsoft 365 is fully integrated. I'm going to drop into a demonstration now So let me remodify my screens and get in there for you. There we go. Are we seeing that all right, guys?
Yeah, I can see it.
Good stuff. So this is the actual interface. And as with most of our products, we maintain the same sort of style sheet that you can see. We've got our menus there on the left-hand side, main interaction there on the center. We've come through to backup.management, nice easy name to remember there for wherever you are out in the field, for example. Credentials to access the platform are enforced with two-factor. There's no way around that. We know that MSPs are extremely hot targets for hackers these days, so that's why that's enforced. And I'd question anybody that isn't running two-factor against their backup solution right now. Being an MSP-friendly product, we will take care of your workstations and servers, and as I mentioned earlier, the different categories inside those. So Mac devices, Linux devices, and Windows devices. And then there's the Microsoft 365 cloud-to-cloud backup there listed. Down below, we have a hierarchy which you create. It's just containers for each of your customers that you've got, so that you can keep things nice and neat. You can assign permissions to these folders, both internally or externally, and they are also controlled by roles. And there's a whole bunch of roles that you can assign, and as well as security officers who have the ability to see special keys that are required to do recoveries. So throw in all the devices you'd like to into one of your customers to keep things nice and neat, which I think is great there, allows you to focus. But at the same time, you can also view your entire estate here. This is all my customers, and I can see the last 28 days worth of backups there. That's what that color graph is showing me. Green is good, red not so good, but oftentimes it corrects itself anyway. And should I ever need to troubleshoot that, I'm welcome to click on that device and delve through the logs on that particular error messaging. We have a wonderful knowledge base to research any noted errors. And we, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have a wonderful team that can help you out with any ongoing issues. To the left, I have a bunch of views. I've actually made these custom views here called bronze, silver, and gold. And these are just the ways that I'm positioning the product to my customers. We can actually design these or move these columns around as we see fit. There's a whole heap of telemetry you can bring into these tables, whether it be, for example, Hyper-V data or SQL data, or the size of the server, or the timestamp information, or the archive information, whatever you want to measure, we can probably measure it for you, I'll just say, and then you can save those views. But just going back to bronze, silver, and gold, my bronze customers, for example, they don't want to pay me too much. Maybe they don't. Maybe I struggle to actually get them convinced that they need a backup for one reason or another. Let's put them onto, say, a 30-day retention backup that's running once per day, giving me 30 days of backup across 30 days. Nothing fancy on top of that. However, if maybe one day they recognize the value in the backup product and see that I can actually offer more benefit here, say in the silver level of backup, which is going to give me a good blend of options, I'll set the retention on these backups to, say, 60 days, and I'll up the rate of the backup to every 4 hours. So every 4 hours for the next 60 days, a backup will run. Bolted on top of this, let's put on an archive. And archiving is quite special. It's got two amazing features. First one is there are no data quotas for the backup. So the data that you send to us, there's no data quotas to worry about. If you struggle with storage for one reason or another, it's no longer a problem. The second thing is that the data in archiving does not expire ever. It's up to you if you want to remove it, but we will not be removing it. So if you need backups that go out for years and years, that's what you will be doing. To the right there is local speed vault, LSV. Local speed vault, as you can probably guess, is a local copy of the backup. And that can go onto a NAS through a UNC file path share or a locally attached drive. It does not matter. As long as you can present that storage to us, we're more than happy to use that storage. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but it gives you a bit of wiggle room to offer different sorts of plans to the customers or reuse storage that's not being used. Benefits, of course, with the local speed vault are going to be the restore speeds. You're going to receive multipliers on the restore speeds versus the internet speeds if you're pulling that, if you're recovering from across the internet. Times 2, maybe times 3, just depends what the data is that we're working with, I guess. And then if you want to offer a premium solution to a customer, you probably ramp up all those settings that I just showed you. In this case, these guys are offering backups running every hour for the next 90 days. That's over 2,000 backup points for the next 90 days. And then we bolt on archiving, and then we bolt on local speed vault if they want it. And then also you could say offer a standby environment where you have a ready-made copy of that device ready to go. And this might be a good opportunity for me to just show you an example of that. Let's have a look at the recovery locations first. In here, I've got a whole bunch of Hyper-Vs. We're looking to roll this out to VMware eventually. And if you have a VMware infrastructure, we also have another tool that will handle that for you. So you're getting the same sort of functionality. But this is designed to manage or at least view the storage that is available on any of your hypervisors, or Hyper-V hypervisors. So we'll just add a recovery location from here, download the installer, and this installer will run on that hypervisor and it will dial back into this interface here and report back the storage that it's got. It's just a Hyper-V that is ready to be used in this other area that I'm about to show you. If we go to standby image, this is where I've got all my VMs that I've already set up to restore to hypervisors. And if I scroll down, actually, no, if I add to plan, I can choose to add a device here. Let's look through my list of available devices. Give it a moment. I'm going to select my customer, whichever customer it's going to be, choose one of the hypervisors, and I can see a little bit of information on that, but I'll just move on. And you can see my progress is followed through the beads at the top. Let's find a device that I'd like to recover. It looks like a lot of these devices are already added. I think there's usually a couple free. Yeah, here's one. I'll select that. Move on to the next step of the wizard. Check that the credentials are correct. It's quite happy with that so far. Recovery settings, I'm recovering to a Hyper-V, so do I want to recover it as a live VM in that Hyper-V? Yes or no? That's what that left radio button is going to do. If I don't want to do that, I can just recover to a VHDX, to a virtual hard drive file. And then after that, we'll just choose our report settings and who do we want to email on the success of this. This will be running as frequently as you are doing a backup. So if that backup is running every 24 hours, that restore will be occurring every 24 hours. If you're running that backup every hour, it's being recovered every hour because we can, because of that efficient. You are often talking about restore differences of about 0.1% of the original size of the server. And I can show you some evidence of that in the demonstration environment if you like. Let's just pick a device at random here. Hopefully it's a quick one. We're dealing with the speed of whatever the endpoint device is, so not the speed of the website. I can see I am backing up 2 different data source types for this device, both files and folders, as well as system state. And if you look to the left, you can see we're getting some ridiculous timings here. So a minute for system state and under a minute for the files and folders. So just focusing on the files and folders for now, we can see there was a selected size of almost 60 gigabytes. Obviously, we didn't back up 60 gigabytes in 43 seconds. We've done it intelligently. We're focusing on just the changes. So the changes that occurred since the last backup ran was 863 megabytes, and that is a whole file size count. When we drill down into the actual Delta changes themselves, it was 72 megs. 72 megs, and that's all we needed to do. We sent those files off in 43 seconds to complete the backup for the files and folders. And that's just one of the systems. This is the kind of performance you can expect. And these are the types of delta changes you would expect when you're doing a recovery as well. So that's why we can achieve some pretty crazy times when it comes to recovery. We're talking tens of minutes to do recoveries on ready-made servers. But I think I've spoken for long enough. Perhaps it's time to open it up for a bit of Q&A.
Yep, so there's like, thanks for that, Gavin, by the way. So there's a question if, I think it's from Robin. This question is, restores the dissimilar hardware. I'm not sure which one he was referring to along the slides that you did, but
Yep. So we can do a bare metal recovery if you wish. We can do physical to virtual as well, by the way. If you're not sure about that, we can do that, or cross-platform. But more directly on your question, yes, we can restore the dissimilar hardware. Although I found that if you're going to change the hardware drastically, like looks nothing like the original machine, then your mileage may vary. But we generally have a pretty good track record of dissimilar hardware when it comes to those kinds of restores. I hope that answered the question.
All right. So any other questions, guys? Just write it on the right pane there. There's a question section where you can type in your questions, and then we'll try and answer that. We'll probably just stay for a few more minutes in case no one's can ask any questions, and then we'll just end the webinar.
Sure.
Good, great. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Brendan. Question from Ashley. Are you seeing that, Kevin?
What's this? Looking around.
And basically, Ashley's asking if can I back up in Mac OS?
Can you back up Mac OS? You can back up the device. It won't be a full system recoverable backup. So you need to recover the Mac device through your chosen form. So rebuild it or whatever you want to do there with the time machine, I believe it is, and then go over the top with the recovery of whatever we've backed up for your Mac device.
All right. So that a question, Mike? MSP. Traction within particular verticals? That's a question from Ben.
Can you say the question again?
So I don't know how to go about this. So it's a question from Kennedy on MSP and Cove. I'm not sure what was the question there, but I think the question coming from Mike Kennedy. Were you asking about MSP and Cove and how that does relate?
Is that a question? I'm not sure that I follow.
Yeah, so I couldn't get the whole question either.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I cannot see any of the questions coming through.
Here it is. Just managed to pop that out. We'll just quickly go through your questions one by one. So question from Ashley was, is backup storage pricing per GB?
It's best you have a conversation with one of the sales guys, but yeah, above a certain threshold, you will be charged per gigabyte, but there is generally an allowance per device that you bring to the solution.
Okay. And then other question, this question from Mike Kennedy. I'm just looking at it right now. Can you talk about the way data overage is shared, charged within an MSP?
It's more a repeat of the last question, but yeah, once you, well, actually, for each device that you bring in, you increase a storage pool. So if you, for example, bring in 2 servers and you're allocated, for example, 500 gigabytes per server, that'd be 1 terabyte of storage that you can pool across all of your devices.
All right.
But sorry, just to answer the overage questions, once you obviously go above that pool, yeah, there'll be a charge per GB.
Yep.
That
This question
pool works
from
across
Brendan
every
Bard.
customer, by the way, just to be clear.
Yep. Yep. That's done. This question from Brendan Bard. Have you found any really good traction within particular verticals, i.e. health, retail, things of that nature?
Yeah, I've dealt with health and retail a bit in the last year. Finance, really anybody comes to us these days in terms of the verticals. Well, obviously, most of our business is with MSPs, but they often specialize in like lawyers, for example, too, finance industries, builders, architects, engineers, all walks of life, really.
All right. Another question from Ashley. Is this delivered through the enable RMM agent or a separate endpoint agent?
Good question. It can be delivered through an RMM, through the RMM interface. We actually have a custom-made script that makes the job much easier of getting it rolled out. So you don't even have to enter into Cove. You just run the script and choose the device that you want to execute that against. So that can be done for sure.
All right. I think that's pretty much answered all the questions. Just on Jason Venture's question, if yes, there will be a recording for this webinar. I'm just going to go through all of this first, and then I'll let you know if I can send you the recording. Yes. So if there are any other questions, guys. Just probably wait a few minutes and then. Okay. Yes, I'm not looking at any other questions out of the moment. Gavin, so yeah, if there's anything that you want to add or not, but then I think we can just go ahead.
I'm happy to show more parts of the product itself if anybody has any questions. I mean, I've only scratched the surface, just so you know. There is there are more interesting other features in the product.
Yeah.
And show if anybody wants to see it. No one typing?
Don't see anyone typing for now.
Okay. All right. I tried.
Yeah. At least we tried, right? But yeah, anyway, yeah, thanks everyone for joining our webinar. And if there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out to myself at mark@softwall.co.nz. And then obviously, if there's any questions that I might not be able to answer, then obviously I'll bring Gavin across, and we probably can schedule another call, do a demo and whatnot. And anyways, once again, all those that have stayed towards the end, you'll get a $40 pizza voucher. You can I'll arrange that and be sent out to you guys. So yeah, thank you again, and you all have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.